Hello. Going to be in the Gauntlet-Con virtual convention coming up. I'm running two games. One of them is Monster of the Week game, and one of them is for Divine Blood Second Edition, which is currently in playtest with my friends and a couple other people. Um, and if you want to know what Gauntlet-Con is, give me a moment to do a screen share. There we go. Gauntlet-Con is a online convention. They do story games, indie RPGs, old school um, Renaissance, that kind of stuff. A lot of different things like that. It's pretty broad base of things. Now, if you're thinking a little bit of deja vu and maybe I've heard this before, it's because I did another live broadcast on the same subject and I didn't like it, so I deleted it. So I'm doing it again. But at least this way I have the bugs worked out. But I should have recorded and done it that way anyway. So here we go. Now, I went onto the Gauntlet G Plus community and put up a poll asking people what they would be interested in seeing me demo on how to create characters. And the answer ended up being middle school friend. Now, in this scenario, the pre-gens are at this moment, the pre-gens mostly are supernatural beings like gods, demons, candidates thereof, relatives thereof, that kind of thing. I have a couple mortals, but not as many. One of the goals is I think we're going to try to add more pre-gens to the list. I'll probably be diving into the behindthename.com a little bit more and to come get names. And I'll let me see here. There we go. I need to, now that it's not minimized, I can show you. So the winner of the poll for 12 votes was the middle school friend of Amaterasu, because the scenario is that there has been an earthquake in Seattle and a major storm. And in the wake of this earthquake and the storm being ongoing, Amaterasu is missing. The gods and demons of Nirvana can't really connect with her on their collective mindscape, and the demons and gods of Yomi are just now hearing about her being missing, and of course there are a lot of mortal authorities and all that are concerned about a girl from what, as far as many of them are concerned, either as a close friend or from a well-off family, is missing out in what is currently a disaster area. And the winner was Amaterasu's middle school friend, who I actually have art for the canonical version of. This is Lisa Krendal as she appears in the Demon Next Door sourcebook for the first edition of the game. Now, I tend to be a little bit loosey-goosey on physical descriptions for characters that are strictly role-playing game based. Especially the scenarios. I mean, I give some description of them sometimes, and I have some idea in my mind of what they look like, especially since I want art and I need to commission it. In her case, she is sort of a mix between German and Northwest Native American. Can't remember which tribe I was thinking of off the top of my head, but that general area. But whatever you want. Besides, the setting has technology in it, even without going to the supernatural communities, has technology for people to get gene treatments to change what their apparent ethnicity is. So it could be anything. Okay, let's see. Now, let's do this. Do a different screen share so I can get back to showing you what character creation is. Yes, I am leaning on my hand. Let's go back to Chrome. Here we go. There is the big old thing. I'm going to minimize the picture. There is, you can't see that because you're looking at the big old Gauntlet-Con 2018 cool logo. Now, first thing I'm going to do, and I don't have a version of Lisa in first edition Divine Blood because I mostly used first edition. I did for the first edition Divine Blood, I had a scenario for running it that had pre-gens, but the don't let the sun go down one, I generally wanted to have people the option to make characters quickly, and for that reason, I tended to use Fate Accelerated. I'll show you the Fate Accelerated version in a moment. It's right there. But this is what a character in first edition Divine Blood looks like. It's a mixture of Strands of Fate and character creation, and the gameplay was mostly Fate Core, which worked out quite well. And we liked it quite a bit, but in terms of publishing your own game, we ran across a problem, or I ran across a problem, one of the two, that a lot of these things are licensing issues. I am permitted to use a certain amount, a certain number of them for that I assume the ones that I make up I can use, but of the ones that are in the original book, I am permitted to reprint a certain number and that's it, which makes it difficult for people wanting to get the full experience. So that licensing issue aside, we were thinking about that and trying to get around that and come up with an edition that's all my own. That the character creation is something I can use without really a concern. I'm still using a lot of fake core, so I'm still doing licensing, but their licensing permissions are much more minimal and encouraging for people making their own game. But when we looked at this other thing, we also decided to start addressing other issues we had. For one thing, Strands of Fate has lots of aspects, lots and lots of aspects. You have the 5 character aspects, you have the 5 specialty aspects, standard to start with. You can get up to 10 of these, and you can get up to 7 of these. And also, if you have power advantages, each power advantage will have an aspect defining what exactly gives you that power. So it became very cumbersome to keep a list of all the aspects in plays and what could or could not be compelled as an aspect with a fate point. The other thing we had is Strands of Fate in Standard has 12 characteristics, 4 each in physical, mental, and social. As an option, you can have affinities. Usually a character would only have 1. I went for 3 because I like granularity, and I decided I was going to be granular in looking at what characters had for training and psychic abilities. Unfortunately, this came up with the thing that sensitive is a very frequently used one. Manipulative is a very frequently used one because that's like the messing with the world around you. Sensitive is sensing. Metabolic is pretty much just used when you're targeting yourself, so became much less valuable. And having these 12 was just a little bit cumbersome. Too much granularity, in my opinion. So we decided to stream down a little bit. Now, I'm going to show you what that is. First, I'm going to show you the Lisa Krendal version from Fate Accelerated. We didn't stream down this much. But this is the Fate Accelerated version from the last time I ran this. Nobody has yet actually played this character, to my dismay. I mean, granted, she is a middle school character in the midst of Hero Cop, General of the Gods, Jack-O-Lantern, the Morrigan, and lots of other high-powered names. And then there's this middle school girl, which is the reason why I've really wanted somebody to play her. Okay. Anyway, this is how I did her in Fate Accelerated. On to the way we're doing it here. Now, to start with, yeah, we do have a little bit of a different thing here. We're going to get to that in a moment. You're going to have aspects. And I've dropped defining aspect and disadvantage. I've dropped the aspect alphabet a little bit. To start with, a character has 3 aspects. You can get a 4th and a 5th aspect through experience point spins. And yes, this is a Fate game that uses experience points. I've kept that from Strands of Fate. Though I assign how much experience points you get at the end of a session is based off of a milestone situation. So her high concept, and I'm going to keep the one that I did for the Fate Accelerator because it's perfectly fine. Blessedly lucky middle school student. And I am going to go ahead with the trouble being the same, and that is diving in the deep one. She has that typical sense of youthful sense of immortality. For the other one, other aspect is plucky determination. These function exactly how you expect aspects to function in Fate Core. That's pretty much they're exactly that. Trappings are what I am doing with the specialty aspects from Strands of Fate, where those were meant to be very more narrowly defined things. In this case, I'm even having the way their mechanics work so much. You don't spend fate points on these so much, not usually. What these are just lists of things that give narrative justification for some stuff, and if you had narrative justification for it and a trapping already and a trapping related to it, you could get the trapping gives you a +1. Like in our playtest right now, somebody has as one of their trappings a custom 45 pistol, which whenever he's shooting with the pistol, if he's shooting with a gun, he can already shoot with a gun. That's something humans can do. If he's shooting, he's a bodyguard, so we already know he's skilled with it. But if he's shooting with his custom, I give him a +1 to the roll because he's so used to that gun. It's one of his trappings. But for her, usually the suggestion I have is like a gear, an ability, and contacts. But in this case, we're going to go all abilities, I think. Because for one thing, it's mostly focused on being a one-shot, and she is away from a lot of her friends, and also not having a lot of gear on hand. So here are some things she is good at. Slipping adult supervision. So when she wants to sneak away out of the under the looks of that police officer that wants to make sure she gets safety and her parents, she has a +1 to act on it. If she wants to slip out underneath the eyes of that demon that's monologuing, she has a +1 to it. Unending goodwill, just because she is a very nice person. Now, the last ability, changing this from another thing, I think I will go with innocent inspiration. She has lived a more or less sheltered life. She's rubbing shoulders at a private school with Amaterasu, even though she doesn't know that Amaterasu was a goddess. Now, after that, we're going to go on to here. For this, you have 7 points to distribute between categories. And then you have another 2 points to assign to specific stats. I'm just going to go and look, and good. Okay. So the categories here, we have physical, mental, social, which is fairly direct. And we have honesty, cunning, and insight. You'll notice I don't have any psychic stats at all here. This was at a suggestion of one of my play testers that it really skewed things a lot. And also, so we're basically using making the psychic stuff be wrapped up in aspects now and trappings, and keeping to the physical, mental, and social stuff. So for honesty, this is a flat out the brute force version of the stat. Like body would be the for body. It's not just strength. This would be strength, sheer strength, or it would be that flat out sprinting run with no grace to it. Genius again is flat. It's probably a bit misnamed given the way we're using it, but these are in playtest mode. We'll think about that later. is that flat out power through on sheer knowledge and understand sheer knowledge, power through a mental thing. And charisma is that force of personality, getting people to do what you want, that kind of stuff. Cunning is when you come at things with a little bit more technique or manipulation. Proficiency would be like if a flat out sprint is body, then parkour is proficiency. If going through brute force on a puzzle and trying all the different combinations as quickly as you can, inspiration is in identifying gaming the system basically, and deception is in not full out presence and charismaing or intimidate charismaing people into fear or liking you or whatever. This is where you're pulling little manipulative tricks that make them lean one way or the other. Insight senses, if sprint is body and parkour is proficiency, senses is looking at the course ahead of you and looking for places, looking ahead of what's coming and using that to plan out your action ahead of time. Resourcefulness would be looking for a pattern from previous, looking at an overall pattern and figuring out the answer based on the pattern, which is a little bit like gaming the system in inspiration. But again, inspiration is you're gaming the system just in general, just figuring out how a quirk of mathematics that comes to you and that you can do a shortcut. Resourcefulness would be when you analyze the puzzle first and use that to make your choices. And empathy is in reading people and using your read of them to react to them in ways that they would find favorable. How you just before you would describe this would be more like Empowered by the Apocalypse, where you say, I'm going to try to run away this way, and you describe it, and I, as the GM, say, okay, that sounds like senses, or that sounds like inspiration, and I would do that. So how do we get these? Well, first we're going to do the category. I'm going to do physical appear first, and that's a 0. And because she is a 12-year-old girl that doesn't spend particularly a lot of time on her athletics. Her mental is going to be 1 because she's reasonably good at that. Her social is going to be 2 because she's sort of a powerhouse there. Now, before she is, if you look over here, she is sneaky, flashing, quick. Not particularly forceful, but she is clever. So, sneaky, quick, and flashy seems to fall into the, I'm going to think falls in a little bit of the cunning. Now this is pretty much converting, I'm looking at this more, I'm not so much converting, I'm looking at the Fate Accelerated version as a shorthand for, well, how was I thinking of this character when I last created her? And using that. So honestly, I'm going to put it 1, and inside I'm going to put it 1. So now we combine them. So 0 plus 1 is 1. 0 plus 2 is 2. 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 1 plus 1 is 2. And I'm doing the clue thing. And this is 3. And this is 4. And this is 3. So that is our 7 completed. I'll put it in bold. So now our 2 we can place wherever we want. She is kind of sneaky and keeps her eyes open. So I'm going to put 1 in resourcefulness, and I am going to put 1 in charisma because she is very, very charismatic. And that will add here a 3, and it will add here a 4. Now, currently, any one of these categories and any one of these here, oops, don't want to do that, can get to a maximum of 2. So any one stat can have a maximum of 6. over the game. I don't expect that to happen so much because we tend to be happy around the 4 and 3 range. Now, one thing I like about how this system works, and this was another thing that was suggested by one of my playtesters when we were, because I was already thinking a 3x3 system. One of my playtesters suggested that we assign the stats to the categories instead of directly to the stats, and then maybe add a bonus on top of that. Speaking of which, stats are assigned, so I'm going to bolt that out. That's just what I'm doing for this demo. Now, if you are doing something that you are good at, that it is within your wheelhouse, that you have some sort of aspect that says, or stunt that says, this is something you do a lot, you would roll the stat. So she doesn't have anything particularly on here about being athletic. But she is a middle school student, so if she were doing a blind run, if she were doing a full-out sprint, I would let her use the body of 1. It wouldn't be that good. If she wanted to parkour her way across but if it were something there is no justification for, like let's say she wants to parkour her way through a obstacle course, she's rolling physical +0 because it's not something she's good at. Likewise, she does not have any direct psychic abilities, but everybody sentient in this setting has some level of psychic ability powered by life force, which we'll get to later. If the player wants her to have some sort of psychic incidents, like, let's say the example is the picking up the car off of the trapped person, though that would be for an adult, or doing some short-term burst of nearly superhuman ability, or a sudden hunch, or whatever, some sort of minor psychic thing, she could try to do that, but she would roll one of these or one of these. She would not roll one of these. If I wanted to, and I have been entertaining the idea that if it's really outside the lines, like the psychic things would be, she would roll one of these. So there's that. And this, with the categories combined to form the stats and the stat points here, it gives me a lot of granularity, but it's also really easy to assign real quick. I like that. Anyway, stress. Now, I'm not doing the full Strands of Fate thing, which is you combine 2 things, and that, like, you would say, oh, you combine body and proficiency, and that's, you get 3. I'm not quite doing that. I'm doing a little bit like out of Fate Core, where everything starts at 0. Everything starts at 2, excuse me. 2 boxes. I'm going to go ahead and change this right now. She is human, so her life force is called Chi. There's some ridiculous jokes about why all the different species have different names for their life force. And to be honest, there is some gameplay reasons for why that is. She is human, and I'll get to what that is based off later. Let's look at physical. You have an additional stress box to physical for each thing in that category 3 or higher. Body is 1, proficiency is 2, senses is 1, so her physical stays at 2. 2 boxes. Her mental is 2, 3, and 3, so she gets 4 boxes there. Her social is 4, 4, and 3, so she has 5 social boxes. She is a very likable girl, and it's going to be really hard for anybody to make her look bad in a long-term way, suffer actual consequences. She might suffer stress and have some people talking about her for a little bit, but in long-term wise, her reputation is solid. So, humans, for their life force, every species combines 3 different things for the life force, and we don't have a complete list yet. We've pretty much only done the gods, the demons, the humans, and for the races we're playtesting. So for humans, our human life force is adaptable, efficient, but it's also weak. So to represent that, we did not use any of the honesty traits because that's forcefulness. We decided to go with proficiency, resourcefulness, and inspiration, which 2, 3, and 3. So she has a fairly strong spirit as well. For refresh, this is how many fate points you start a session with. She has 3. You can reduce that if you want more stunts. For stunts, by the way, you can start with 3. You can fill these in as you go along. Same with the aspects. The only aspects you really need are the high concept and the trouble, and you can fill in the other aspect as we go along. You can fill in all the trappings as we go along. And even in this case, I would almost say you could fill in the categories as we go along, and you suddenly decide you need something. It's like, well, I want a 2 in this stat that you just told me to roll, so I'm going to put a 1 and a 1 there until you use up all your points. Now, for stunts, we're going to get into a little bit of 80s, 70s, what do you call it? Nostalgia here. We're going to call one of her stunts Red Chief's Revenge. There's a couple different ways we're using stunts. +2 in a specific situation and to a stat, +1 in broad situations or a category, access to new action type, grant aspect, make a trapping a persistent aspect, perform a class of action with a different attribute than usual. We're not really doing that because of the way we do aspects. So probably have to put a note on that we're not really doing that. And modify success with style, which we might do. Okay, so Red Chief's Revenge is going to be +1 to mental actions in making life miserable for adults trying to capture or hold her. Not that she's had much chance to practice that, but just giving her that stunt because by her very nature, she's good at that. I am also going to give her an enhanced trapping, unending goodwill, which makes that a persistent aspect. And what a persistent aspect is it's like an aspect, but you do not have to spend a fate point to get the +2 or the reroll. However, if I use it against you, you have harder time resisting the compel. And it's just because that part of you is so much a part of you that it is really easy to call up. Okay. I would note you can spend a fate point on it in addition to the persistent aspect. That is a thing you can do. So you could end up evoking it twice if you have a fate point and use the persistent. That's a thing you could do in strands. If you have done a maneuver to put free tags on it, you could end up using it a lot within one time, but you have to set that up by doing maneuvers on it and building up tags to one big use. The last thing we're going to do is that, what did I call it before? I'm going to change it a little bit. Oh, yes, amazingly, okay. Amazing luck. And this is not anything supernatural. The supernatural aspects of this universe are, for the most part, objectively measurable. The cultures that know about them can look at them and analyze them and pretty much treat them as a science or an art, one of the two, or a combination thereof, really. But there are still those quirks of some people are just lucky. It's a little bit outside of the psychic phenomena. It's a little bit outside of physics. It's just a thing. It's like the inverse Will Wheaton. Okay, so amazing luck. Normally on success with style, you get a boost. In this case, I'm going to say on a success with style, when When preaching, what's a good, oh, it's going to be luck. When on a success with style, when facing great odds, and the great odds would not be determined by the difficulty number, would be determined by what horrible nastiness could happen if she fails. Um, Success with style when facing great odds. A trade in may trade in levels of success. I forget what we're calling them right now. Or boosts. 1 or 1. And what a boost is like a 1 round aspect. So basically, let's say a tornado starts sweeping through and she is trying to make a jump for cover. And she makes a success with style. She can bring the success with style would be succeeding by 3 or more. She could spin down levels of success to get a different boost to help her on her next action, or help her on her next action down to the point where it's still a success, which would probably be she could do it twice. If she got +3, she could do it twice and still have a tie. So she might want to only do it once. So at a +3, it doesn't really give her much benefit, but if she rolled a 4, she could get 2 boost instead of 1. If she rolled a 5, you know what? For additional boost, because she'll get 1 boost for getting success with style. So if she gets that 3+, she can spend 1 down to get down with a plus to a. She can spend 2 to get down to a plus. She can already do that. This is we're building a stun as we go, so we don't need to do additional. So if she got that +3, that's what you need for success with style. Take 3. She could buy down 1 and 2 and have +1 over the difficulty, and get 2 boosts that might give her some benefit on her next action. And she could decide what those are. If she were trying to duck under the legs of some guy with a Tommy gun or whatever other thing I threw at the players, she could get, and she rolls a +5. She could buy it down 4 different boosts to give on herself or on that guy, so that somebody else has a bonus to hitting him. Like he is distracted trying to follow her, off balance. She's at a bad angle she's at a bad angle to be shot, and he is very irritated. All of those would provide a boost for, say, the rather ticked off goddess nearby about to punch him in the face. And that would be a thing. This might be a little bit too powerful, but it does depend on them getting success with style, which isn't as common as you might think. But there it goes. I could get more stunts, and also I want to try it just because I want to try it out, because we are in the playtest thing, and we're going to need to. I do want people to be making their own stunts with this more than just doing the stunts that are in the book. But we will need a list of example stunts to give people to say this is kind of what we're talking about, and for that we need to try some out. Now, for consequences, in Fate Accelerated, there are 3 consequences, and they're shared across all the different types of consequences you can get. Just like there is 1 stress track shared across physical, social, mental, or anything else. I have obviously broken up the stress tracks because I like that level of granularity, and I have also broken up the consequences. So there will be 1 physical consequence. I have it just here, just a list here so you know which one. There will be 1 physical mild consequence, 1 mental mild consequence, 1 social mild consequence, so on. It isn't just 1 mild consequence for all of them. What this means is if you're unlucky, you can have mild consequences from all 4 categories and be really messed up. in small ways that you will recover from pretty quickly. But for this scene, you're really messed up. It also means you can have major or severe consequences, which would mean you would be messed up for a full session. Um, and as a note, severe, extreme, and defeated consequences are persistent. Defeated consequences usually mean the character is out of the session. It could be things like insane, dead, imprisoned, um, mana burst, or whatever other odd chi curse I give you based off of overdoing your chi. Mild and major are not persistent, which means they have to be invoked with tags or fate points. Severe and extreme can be invoked quite immediately just by their existence. That's something I got from Strands of Fate. Anyway, that's character creation. The version of Fate I'm doing with, since I'm using bits of Strands of Fate, fortunately not the licensed parts, and bits of, well, they're sort of licensed, but they're not they're not considered intellectual property the way the advantages are. Let's put it that way. I can use the persistent aspect kind of thing without much worry. That's one element. But I'll probably be commenting on them having come up with that. But anyway, I that is the second edition for Divine Bloods as it exists so far. We do not have a particular we do not have a. I'm going to go ahead and screen share Lisa's picture back up again. Because I'm not sure about looking at my own face. Oh, right. I need to unminimize it before I can screen share it. Okay. We do not have a list of feats yet. We're trying a couple different feat structures, especially for the psychic abilities. About the only difference you would find from the gods and demons is that they would have. I would suggest things like, for a god, you would probably want your third aspect to be something like goddess of bloodshed, or god of travelers, or demon of fear, or something related to your particular specialty and supernatural abilities. Curious. Oh, let me zoom out. There we go. Because it's cute. It's a cute picture. Anyway, this was done for me by an artist by the name of Avianetka. You can find her on DeviantArt. I'll probably link her in the description now that I think about it. But yeah, you're going to wonder how I can. I guess you're not. Anybody who's in Gauntlet community won't wonder how you can use the same stats to do somebody who's vastly more powerful, objectively speaking, than a middle school girl. Those of you that do story games, no problem with that concept. You know exactly how that works. For those of you that are listening to this and aren't familiar with Fate or Power by the Apocalypse or the like, it's a matter of justification. There is a very good thing breaking down the New York fight at the end of the first Avengers movie as a Fate accelerated game, and showing how the different power levels of the characters act and function with each other, and how they support each other and can be equally effective on battle and use the same basic stats, despite the fact that Thor and Hulk can bench press tremendous amounts, almost immeasurable weights, while Hawkeye and Black Widow are highly trained humans in the sense of that universe. But it's the same here. If we were to do one of the gods or goddesses, for one thing, the physical limits of gods and goddesses and other species and humans are not all that different. They can bolster themselves up with psychic abilities a lot, use like a PK field type thing to reinforce their strength or resilience or stuff like that. Gods have some anatomy things that include such things as they won't bleed to death. If it is they aren't killed outright, they will not bleed to death. The only way you get them towards bleeding to death if you do something to their life force. It's because of the way their body works. It's stuff like that. I mean, let's see. If Erd were to punch, if Lisa were to punch a wall, she is more likely to hurt herself. Even if she rolls very well, she is unlikely to hurt the wall. If Erd were to punch a wall, there is a good potential that she could cave in the wall, whether she means to or not. And basically the way I would handle that is, I would just probably say that Lisa punches the wall and say, and I might not even make a roll. I just say it kind of hurts a little bit, and leave it at that as an RP thing. Unless she were actually trying to break through a door, I might have her roll because she has justification that she is absurdly lucky. And while it won't be her strength that helps her ram down a door, she might be lucky enough that it's like about to give or something like that. So I would have her roll for it. She has that justification. With Erd, she is a goddess and a general, so just by that, she's a trained warrior. She has well above normal human strength. It's even without concentrating on enhancing it. And breaking down a door isn't going to be that particularly difficult for her. She might not even have to roll for breaking a door that Lisa has to roll for. That kind of thing. And the challenge for those of you that do not know narrative games, the challenge for them is in crafting challenges for each character that fit their limits, and also making sure that each one is contributing to the story as much as the other. This is sort of the same difficulty you have when you're writing a story and you're trying to get Jimmy Olsen to help in with the story as much as Superman is. And it's well possible because there are a lot of stories out there where Jimmy Olsen's very helpful, even if it's not him punching the bad guys. But there it is. And at the end there, I started getting into preaching the choir because I'm mostly going to link this to the Gauntlet community. But there you go. You can enjoy the cute picture of Amaterasu apologizing to Lisa, or this version of Lisa at least, while listening to me rant about stuff you already know. Anyway, there you go. Talk to you later.